Today we're going to learn a piece called Bad Jack. You may have it in one of two books. It could be in this book, in which case it will look like this, or it could be in this book, in which case it will look like that because it's got the tab notation with it as well. I'm going to start off by playing the whole piece, and then we'll divide it into sections and deal with each section separately. The bit that you need to deal with first in section 1 is the very first bar. This is the pattern that the rest of section 1 is pretty much based on. So you're going to have open A, string 5, fret nothing, C, string 5, fret 3, D, string 4, D sharp, string 4, fret 1, and E, string 4, fret 2. The first bar goes like this. Can you hear the spaces between the notes? Those are the rests. So really you need to be stopping each note after you've played it. So it sounds short. You'll be playing this bit with your thumb, and each time you've played a note, your thumb goes and sits back on the string. That's what makes the rest in between the notes. So it will look like this. And your thumb sits back on the string each time you've played a note. The next bar uses the same notes, but the rhythm is different. So listen to the rhythm. That's how it goes. So once you've got the first bar and the second bar going, see if you can do them both one after the other. It should sound like this. Like that. It's exactly the same notes except that there's a double A in the second bar, but the rhythm is very different. So just make sure you've got that difference in the rhythm. I'm going to skip over bar 3 because it's exactly the same as bar 1 and deal with bar 4 now. It goes. You may want to play the E with your right hand thumb, but the G with your finger. So it goes like that, and you're playing the bass strings with your thumb and the treble strings with your finger. Alternatively, you could play all of that with your fingers and just the last two notes with your thumb. The thing that you really don't want to be doing though is playing the whole lot with your thumb. Don't do that. Switch to your fingers for this bit. One more time, that last bar. And here's the entire first line all put together. When we add the second line, it is very, very similar. The only difference is that the double A at the end is not there. So we're only going to go to G, E, C, A and leave the next three notes to be the lead-in to section 2. So here is the whole of part 1. Now we're going on to section 2. We're starting with the last 3 notes on line 2 because that's the lead-in. And here is the first phrase of section 2. Like that. You will be switching here between your right hand fingers and your right hand thumb. Your thumb will be playing the bass strings, so the D, D, leaving a rest in between as we did before, and the A on string 5, sticking your thumb straight back on the string afterwards to make that little rest. Your fingers will be playing all the other notes, so it will go like that. The second phrase is very similar. So the first 2 phrases of part 2 go like this. I'm going to leave out the third phrase because it's exactly the same as the first one and move on to the fourth phrase. This starts in bar 14 with the 3 Ds. It goes like this. You'll need to use 2 different fingers for the D and the high G, and at the end they both slide up to fret 5 in the same pattern as you had with the D and the G. They just slide up as a pair, and that gives you E and high A. To play the D and the G, you're going to need to play with 2 fingers, your middle finger on string 1 and your first finger on string 2. This is how I'd like you to practice doing that. First of all, rest your thumb on string 6. That just stabilises your hand, and those 2 fingers, just do bunny ears with your fingers. That is the action that you're going to be using on strings 1 and 2. So, middle finger on string 1, first finger on string 2, and you just play them together. Try not to get too much underneath the strings and pull, because that doesn't sound nice. Just gently, but you are going to need to do it twice in a row. So practice doing that. If your hand tightens up at any point, go back to thumb and bunny ears. This is what it will look like when you do that bit all the way through. You're probably going to need to practice for a while with the 2 fingers, getting the notes even before you can add the thumb to it. You will not be able to rest your thumb all the time while you're doing that, but it's a good starter to get the technique right. And as if that weren't enough, there is a crescendo through that 4th phrase. So once you're happy with the technique that you're doing with your right hand, the technique that you've got with your left hand, see if you can put the crescendo in. So this is the whole of part 2. You might notice that part 3 is very similar to part 1, but I'd like you to start from that pair of notes that you just finished on for part 2. Starting there and practicing starting there means that the 2 sections will flow together and you won't end up with an artificial sounding gap in between them. So you're going to go you'll notice that the very first note, the open A, has been swapped for that pair of 5th fret notes. The bit in section 3 that is different is the bit that starts at bar 23. You may notice that it actually looks very similar to what happened at the end of part 2, starting in bar 15. There are two main differences between those two bits, those two phrases. One is that the high G and D are now a low G and a low D. So you're playing strings 3 and 4 with your bunny ear fingers instead of strings 1 and 2, but otherwise it's exactly the same technique. The bass note is still string 6. You don't have any left hand fingers involved in this yet, but the pattern is backwards. So instead of having 2 high notes and then a bass note, you've got the bass note and then the 2 higher notes. So that bit, starting on bar 23, goes like this. And what you end up with is A and E and string 5, so you're playing 3 notes all together. Your thumb, middle finger and index finger. It's a good idea to have that A and the E ready, hovering in the right place so that you can get them in time. One more time, that bit, bars 23 and 24. Ending on that last chord in bar 25. And then we have the ending, bars 25 and 26. Again, I would start on the last pair of notes that you ended with there. So you're starting with the A, the E and the open A. It goes like this. It's using the same notes as you had in the very first bar. That's why it's so worthwhile spending a bit of time on that first bar so that you really know those notes. They are used so much in this piece. You've got the rests in between the notes, so you're separating them. And the last 4 notes have got accent marks with them, so they're not only loud, they are extra heavy. Play them strongly with your thumb. In this piece, the dynamics are pretty much all the way through loud. There are those couple of crescendos during the 2 finger passages. It's worthwhile spending a bit of time on that crescendo. It's the same pattern each time you play that with a crescendo. So spend a bit of time on that. Make sure that your thumb is playing very strongly. And that your fingers match that strength when they switch over. And one more time, the whole piece all the way through.